Okay, I am recording. Thank you. So the central fissure divides the hemispheres. In the front, we have your frontal lobes. And notice how it's all Willy Wonka, willy-nilly until you get there. That is a single, almost continuous, definitive sulcus that divides the parietal lobes from the frontal lobes. So that is the central sulcus, not to be confused with the central fissure. So these larger kind of lobe-like portions are called gyri. The plural, singular, gyrus. And then these little divisions, these little cracks in here are sulci, singular, sulcus. The purpose of the brain being shaped like this is, remember, all of that really fun stuff, right? That gray matter where all the processing is happening on the outside layer. So by wrinkling the surface, you increase the surface area without needing more space within the container. So the name of the game here is surface area. We need a broad area of neurons doing the work, but you only have a tiny little brain case in order to squeeze them in. So if you have a huge sheet of paper and a small little box, how do you fit it in? You wrinkle it up. You ball up the piece of paper nice and tight. And that is why the brain looks the way it does. Now, from this central sulcus, we have the pre-central gyrus and the post-central gyrus. This is the one doing motor processing, right? And this is the one doing the sensation, so integrating. Looking at the brain, there are a few major structures that we can start to identify. We have the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal, occipital, cerebellum, and you can see a little part of the brainstem right there. That would be the medulla oblongata. The frontal lobe, as we said, was the one responsible for all of the really human stuff, like emotions, planning, intellect, seat of the will, restricting your like improper social behaviors. The frontal lobe is not fully developed until about the age of 25, which means the frontal lobe isn't fully developed in the teenage years, which tells you a lot about the teenage years. This is why they are so rebellious and rambunctious and defiant, is because the part of the brain that regulates those kinds of impulses and tells you who you are and what you're all about, that part of the brain is still under construction. It doesn't finally finish developing until about 24, 25. In the temporal lobe, this is the auditory lobe. This is where all of your auditory information is processed and integrated. This is also the location of your hippocampus, which deals with memory, short-term and long-term memory, as well as spatial memory. Spatial memory is your memory of space. So can you get up from your bed and walk into your bathroom to use the bathroom without turning on the light in the middle of the night? If you can, it's because you have spatial memory. You remember about how to get to the toilet, that kind of stuff. Parietal lobe is mainly dealing with somatosensory integration. That is a very fancy way of saying body sensory integration, just integrating all the senses that you get from your body. They integrate things like touch and movement and taste and smell. And finally, we have the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is basically a one department complex. It does vision, all different types of vision, whether you're talking about visual processing or interpretation. We could be talking about visuospatial processing. So looking at space and determining how far apart things are, really helpful if you have to run into the outfield and catch a baseball, or figure out exactly how to throw the football so you make the touchdown or whatever it is. I don't do sports, whatever. Motion perception, right? So being able to spot something that's moving, and then like, so when you hear something behind you, you turn your head around and you track it with your eyes, like tracking movement with your eyes. And color differentiation. So remember, the data the brain is getting is just raw data. It has to make meaning to, oh, this is red, and this is red orange, and this is more yellow. Occipital lobe is all about vision. Oh, there's the post-central gyrus and the pre-central gyrus. Isn't that fun? So when we take away the entire hemisphere, then we start to see the really gnarly stuff going on inside the brain. And again, what I want to pull your attention to is the most basic and the most ancient and the most rudimentary functions, like breathing and heart rate. All of that stuff. Oh, let me turn on my pen. Sorry. All of that stuff is happening in the base part of the brain. Then we get cool stuff like emotions, we get memory, then we get integrated body processing, then we get the really cool human stuff like planning and emotions, and like not belching in public. So what I really am pointing at is, when we, in terms of functions of the brain, there is a general like map layout. The more basic things start at the bottom, the more advanced we go up, and then eventually we hit the ceiling. So then the more advanced stuff, we move towards the front. So this is where all the really fancy, cool human stuff is happening. This is where all the super basic, like heart rate, breathing, body temperature, lame, all that automatic stuff that we don't really care about, that's where that stuff is happening. Cool stuff? Cool stuff. So we've talked about the cerebrum. Let's talk a little bit about the midbrain. So one thing that I do want to point out is there. Let me slide this over. There's your pituitary gland. Notice how it just kind of dangles there. It's just kind of hanging out like a little punching bag hanging from the ceiling. Like I said, there is a very special bony little saddle that it sits in the sphenoid bone called the sella turcica, which is Latin for the Turkish saddle. This little spot looks like a saddle. Pituitary sits in. This portion of the brain is known as the diencephalon. And the diencephalon portion here is all the hormonal stuff, right? This is where puberty begins. This regulates growth and development. This regulates, body temperature, things of that nature. It's down here in the brain stem where the really basic functions go on. So here we have the pons. This is the middle portion of your brainstem. The midbrain is a little bit more superior to this. But this guy is the site of the origins of your trigeminal, abducens, facial, and auditory nerves. So you've got cranial nerves arising from this portion. Down here, now my app is literally naming each of these individual little segments, but all of these segments are part of the medulla oblongata. This is the lowest portion of the brainstem. It is a continuation of the spinal cord. The upper part forms the floor of the fourth ventricle of the brain, and it controls things like breathing, blood pressure, and heart rate. Again, the more basic the function, the lower down in the brain you go. So at the very bottom of the brain is like keeping the heart beating, lungs breathing. Super basic stuff. Now here in the back, and we'll turn the brain around so we can see it really is kind of a double-sided portion. So we've got a left and a right. These are lobes of your cerebellum. The cerebellum, think about drunks and toddlers. It's all about coordinating muscle movement, regulating the activities of your agonist and antagonist muscles, making that muscle movement smooth and graceful. This lobe is also involved in planning movement that is about to occur, evaluating sensory information for action, as well as fine motor coordination. When we talk about fine motor control, we're talking about things like handwriting, we're talking about things like knitting and crocheting, typing, things of that nature, video gaming, right? You know, just the essential stuff. Mm. There was one other thing that I wanted to mention. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember.
Left versus right.
Pardon? I'm sorry, say that again?
Oh, I said left versus right, maybe? I don't know. I'm guessing.
No. I'm going to move on to the cranial nerves. So when we look at cranial nerves, we need to be able to name them by number. I'm not going to give myself enough space here. I am so sorry. 9, 10, 11, 12. So when I am writing mine out, the first thing I do is I run through my mnemonics. On, old. What are you doing? Oh my God. Sorry, my notes app is acting crazy on me. There we go. All right. On old Olympus, towering tops, a Frenchman and German viewed some hops. I know, it's weird, but this sucker has stuck with me for over a decade. So when I think about cranial nerves, this is just the thing that pops into my brain. So cranial nerves, number 1 through 12. Then we have on old Olympus, towering tops, a Frenchman and German viewed some hops. On old Olympus, towering tops, a Frenchman and German viewed some hops. So one of the ways that I like to kind of visualize these things is cranial nerve number 1. That is your olfactory nerve. The olfactory nerve gives you a sense of smell. Cranial nerve number 2 gives you vision. This is your optic nerve. Cranial nerve number 3 is the oculomotor nerve. It moves the eyeballs upwards. So I draw my 3s in like little eyebrows over my eyes and my nose. Cranial nerve number 4 also moves the eyeballs. Cranial nerve number 5 is the facial nerve. So number 5 frames the whole face. Cranial nerve number 6 is also involved in eye movement. It moves the eyes inward and downward. So you give the sixes like little teardrops because that's the direction that it moves the eyeballs. Cranial nerve number 7 is the trigeminal nerve. 7 innervates the whole face. Cranial nerve number 8 is your auditory nerve. It connects to your ears and gives you a sense of hearing. Cranial nerve number 9 is the glossopharyngeal nerve. The glossopharyngeal nerve is where your tongue is. Cranial nerve number 10 is your vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is responsible for things like swallowing. It goes down into the organs. Cranial nerve number 11 is your spinal accessory nerve. It innervates the neck and shoulders. Cranial nerve number 12 is the hypoglossal nerve. It goes underneath your tongue. And there you have your cranial nerve little face. Isn't that cute?
I actually
cute.
love that.
Thank you so much. That is super helpful.
So what I recommend you guys is you draw this face over and over and over and over again. That's how you learn it. And I know that it sucks, but this one, there ain't no way around it. Because once you've got your face drawn, we got to come back here and we got to put functions and everything else on here. The other thing we'll need is which of these nerves are sensory or motor or both. So the mnemonic that we use is some say marry money, but my brother says big business makes money. So S means sensory. It is a sensory nerve. But with the sensory nerves, you guys, there's a pattern. Look at how many we have. We only have 3. Think about what's going on in the face. Nose, eyes, ears. That's it. So your sensory nerves are your smelling nerve, your seeing nerve, and your hearing nerve, right? The olfactory, the optic, and the auditory. Those are your sensory nerves. Motor nerves are sending movement commands. So think about the things that are moving. When we look at our face, right? 4, 6, and 3 were all moving the eyes. 11 was moving the neck and shoulders. 3, 4, 6, 11. The only one left is number 12, moving your tongue. Now, both things that are both sensory and motor, well, that's everything that's left. So your trigeminal, number 5, your facial. We also had 7, 9, and 10. So cranial nerve 7 was the trigeminal nerve. 9 and 10. So it makes sense. But when the information is just simply presented to you, like in a table that you're just supposed to memorize, that's a hard ask to have somebody just memorize a table. But the good news is that these things do make sense. There is a rhyme and a reason to these things. It just means we have to take the time to really understand what the reasoning is. So if you use on old Olympus towering tops, a Frenchman and German viewed some hops, I would be much obliged. If you end up using one of the ones from the PowerPoint, or if you find another one online that works better for you, believe me, use whatever works better for you. What you need is a mnemonic device that sticks in your brain and you'll remember it forever, because that's what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to remember this stuff forever. You'll need to know cranial nerves for the rest of your life. Sorry about it. Some say merry money, but my brother says big business makes money. And I've heard so many different ones of these. Some say Marilyn Monroe, but my brother says Brigitte Bardot. If anybody even knows who Brigitte Bardot is, I'd be impressed. I use On Old Olympus, but I've also seen to touch and feel a good virgin. Ah, heaven. Ah was with the accessory nerve. To touch and feel a good. I don't even remember the rest of them. I remember the one. I remember the one that stuck in my brain, and that's the one that I stuck to it, and that's just the way my brain works. But I encourage you to use whichever one sticks in your brain. I'm not gonna tell you which one to use. You're an adult. So, cranial nerves, good stuff. Do we have any questions over what we've gone over today so far?
Do we have to write the actual like word nerve, or can we just write the first word like olfactory instead of olfactory?
Oh, I would understand what you mean. Yeah, no, I'm not like that. No, as long as I understand what you're talking about, I'm good. All right. If there are no more questions, oh, I got chat. Hold on, let me double check the chat. Which is that drinking and smoking early impacts brain development? Sorry,
that was about the development of the prefrontal cortex.
Ah, yeah. Yep. Gotta look over that baby's brain. Oh, that's a delicate piece of origami. All right. So if we do not have any more questions, we only have about 10 minutes left in class. I'm going to run through that face one more time if you guys want to follow along in your notes or something like that. Here we go. Cranial nerve number 1. Actually, let me just thicken that up a little bit. Cranial nerve number 1, your olfactory nerve, gives you a sense of smell. That's your nose. Cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve, gives you your sense of vision, connects to your eyes. Cranial nerve number 3, the oculomotor nerve. It moves the eyeball upward. Cranial nerve number 4. This moves the eyeball laterally. Cranial nerve number 5, the facial nerve. Cranial nerve number 6, the abducens nerve. I'm sorry, not the abducens nerve. No, that's abducens, right?
What's 4 again?
Trochlear.
And then 5 would be trigeminal, right?
Yeah, trigeminal. That's what I'm looking for. No. Trochlear. Abducens. No, 5 is trigeminal, 6. 7 is facial. Acoustic. Glossopharyngeal. Vagus. Spinal accessory. Hypoglossal. That sounds right. That looks right to me. So 5, 6, then 7, facial. 8 is the acoustic. That's your ears, gives you a sense of hearing. 9, glossopharyngeal, tongue and throat. That's regulating swallowing. 10 is the vagus nerve. It goes down into the lungs and the heart and the intestines, regulates those kinds of functions. 11 is your spinal accessory nerve that innervates the neck and shoulders, helps move your shoulders all around. And 12, hypoglossal, under the tongue. Good stuff?
Yeah.
I have this on a worksheet somewhere. I'll have to dig through my computer and find it, but I have this like on a worksheet. I'll upload it to Moodle. Let's stick it in there so you guys can see it. Good stuff. Any questions? You know, when you mumble, I can't understand a word